Makati Productions present Knights of the Old Republic, Vanguard of the Republic. Written by Jedi Master 76. Once proverbial saviors of the Galactic Republic, the Jedi Knights Revan and Malak have returned to known space as conquerors. With countless ships and soldiers, the two newly christened Dark Lords sweep across the galaxy, unleashing their indomitable war machine against the Republic. Seeing the coming peril and determined to redeem their former brethren, the Jedi Order has joined forces with Colonel Ducian Eto, a brilliant Republic strategist, to keep the Sith Empire from reaching the core worlds. The war comes to Sluis, a recently discovered shipyard world at the edge of Republic space. Though strategically unimportant and industrially insignificant, the Dark Lord Revan seems hellbent on capturing the planet for reasons only he knows. In one of the cities that dot the planet's surface, a squad of Republic soldiers prepares to rescue a number of enslaved natives from their Sith captors. However, their task and their desire to return home will prove more difficult than any of them could have foreseen. The steady whine of laser fire announced another volley. As if an alarm went off near my head, my eyes sprung open and I gasped softly. My vision was blurred, watery, and I couldn't make out anything at all. Struggling to move, I felt the crumbling remains of the room's walls around me, and my gloves collected dust from the concrete floor. As my vision cleared, I began to make out the silhouettes of two men hovering over me. Concentrating as much as I could, I realized that these two were soldiers. Blinking a few more times as if it would clear my head, I struggled to sit up on my elbows. As if he was waiting for me to try and get up on my own, the younger of the two soldiers grasped my left arm. With an assured tug, he lifted me to my feet. I thought my legs were going to give way from under me. Something in my knee clicked in a not-so-natural manner, and I found myself tumbling toward the floor again. Quick thinking from the two soldiers at my side saved me from a nasty fall. Their two armored bodies became crutches, and I mouthed a quick thank you to the pair. I was unsure if any words actually came out of my mouth. That laser fire was still going strong in the distance, deafening me. "You okay, rookie?" the elder of the two shouted. He was my commanding officer, I believe. His voice sounded raspy and hoarse, and he was definitely not happy. "Yeah," I muttered as loud as I could. It felt awkward, but I was more worried about my legs. "You took quite a beating from that mine," the other soldier noted dryly. "Were you watching where you were going?" He was trying to joke with me, I think. It was hard to tell. I responded with the same enthusiasm. Maybe if I had some cover fire while I was being chased by. "We're going to let you go now, Kay," the first soldier interrupted. I didn't even have time to acknowledge him before the two soldiers let go of me, moving away in a nearly simultaneous motion. Luckily for me, my legs proved their worth and kept my body from collapsing again. I was still weak, but I could stand. I heaved a sigh of relief while the other two soldiers returned to their positions by the wall. There were nearly 24 of us in that empty room in that battered building. The last remnants of our company reduced to about 1/10 of our initial strength. Constant fighting over the past few days had devastated our teams and weakened our resolve. Now here we were, hiding like rodents in some abandoned building in a city we did not have under control at all. I could not say for sure why some of my companions joined the army, but I know they were probably happier to be here than me. I had signed up to fight the Sith Empire, the illegitimate spawn of every deplorable thing you could think of, because I was feeling particularly patriotic after a few rounds of whiskey. What a mistake that was. My drill instructor told me that it was our love and fervor for the Republic and its ideals that kept us going strong in combat. Let me tell you, and nothing says I love the Republic like getting shot at by a horde of alabaster-armored, heavy blaster-toting, soulless sons of Banthas while running around like a mindless idiot. No kidding. I should get a medal for all the times I've been shot at. There had been a large Sith attack on Sluis a few months back, and the spoiled bastard politicians in the Galactic Senate only recently gave the all-clear to kick the Sith straight back to the hellhole they came from. However, a dwindling number of recruits and lack of veterans from the Mandalorian War meant they had to cut corners while recruiting and preparing new soldiers. For example, I had received some 5 weeks worth of basic training out in the Rim. I learned how to salute, handle a rifle, and reload that rifle before I was assigned to this company and placed on the front lines. I've never been an ideal soldier. No, Republic Brass probably has a file somewhere that details just how bad I am at the whole combat thing. I had actually walked into a minefield on our last mission. To be fair, I had not walked in on purpose. No, a Jedi was chasing me. Excuse me, Dark Jedi. We have to differentiate between the ones that are helping us and the ones that are killing us. Blue is a friend, red means you're dead. I think that's how the old mantra went. No matter how many Jedi they send to aid us now that their erstwhile friends are causing trouble, I'll never trust them. Light side, dark side, Jedi speak for going AWOL, or shining side. It's all the same. If everyone could see what those Jedi did to my allies on the battlefield, with their mystic devilry and laser swords, they would have no support in the galaxy. I have seen them kill more men than Blaster and Grenade ever will. I swear on the Force that I will never fight a Jedi. Ever. If that means running into a few minefields, so be it. The laser fire stopped. It was a beautiful thing, silence, and not something I fully appreciated. My sore ears welcomed it gladly, even though no one else in my squad looked pleased. Frowning under their murky visors or customized red and yellow helmets, every soldier in the room stopped talking. Aerial bombardment. The scout's warning pulled me out of my introspection damn quick. Everyone who had not suspected the incoming attack was now well aware of the danger. Sith bombers, affectionately dubbed Raptors for their piercing cry, were modified versions of standard Sith fighters. They still had that small, pod-shaped gray body, but they lacked the unique wings. Instead, they only had two extendable flaps that allowed the low-altitude crafts to hover over long distances. And of course, they had bombs. At least they didn't drop nuclear bombs on us like the Mandalorian beasts had done to Sirocco. Laid waste to the entire planet. Even the Sith were not capable of such savagery. Telos came close, but even that was civilized by Mandalorian standards. I was a fool. I didn't even bother bunkering down to prepare for the incoming attack. The bombers soared by, dropping their payload around the building we were taking shelter in, causing the entire district to tremble in their wake. The resultant explosion tore through the upper levels of the building and shattered the walls nearest to the streets. Soldiers around me dove for cover, or at least positioned themselves as close as possible to the floor. I was thrown off my feet and my head smacked the floor. The red armor I was wearing, replete with yellow trim, rattled against my black mesh combat suit. I struggled to remain conscious, despite myself. I knew if I gave in to the darkness now, there was a very good chance I would never wake up. Promptly regaining my full strength, I quickly felt the back of my head. It was swollen, and there was a slight throbbing of pain, but it was not bleeding. If I was not bleeding, I could function. Rolling over, I realized that everything hurt. My ribs were tender and weak to touch, my legs were still trying to recover, and my arms had the strength of Willow nut soup noodles. I positioned myself so I was resting on my chest, and then I tried to use my hands to push up and off the ground. After a few failed attempts, I was back on my feet. All our turret gunners and snipers positioned by the east wall had died, falling to their deaths in the streets below when the wall gave in around them. We were lucky. It seemed as though the bombers had not aimed for us in particular. The hole in the building left over from the bombing run had let sunlight pour into our room. After being used to the dim, almost pathetically weak light from the glow panels in the room, the light was welcome, but unexpected. Sergeant Horn, report. Someone, I think it was the older of the two men who had helped me, shouted. The younger of the pair, Horn, stood up before addressing the other. Looks bad, Major. We lost our primary gunners, our 4 turrets, and most of our snipers. Damn, the Major muttered. He had this look on his face that was indescribable. It looked as though he was panicked, fatigued to death, and furious at the same time. Horn, I want a full damage report. Figure out who's left, and who's able to fight. Yes, sir. The Major turned away from the other soldiers and headed off on his own before activating his earpiece comlink. This is Major Abino Mallory to Corellia Squad. Corellia Squad, we are pinned down in the Mapram Corp. Building with no snipers or turrets. We could use some assistance, over. No reply came, from what I could gather. Some of the other soldiers began to mutter worriedly amongst themselves. I could not hear what they were saying. Truthfully, I did not care too much. I did not know too many of these soldiers, and they did not know me. It was better that way, I think. If we got too attached to each other, we get emotional and become wrecks when someone died. Which, obviously, happened often. It was definitely better when the deaths were announced as ID numbers. While the other soldiers were rearming themselves or searching for extra ammunition, I grabbed my helmet from the broken wall where I had woke up earlier and threw it on my head. It took a moment to get used to the translucent visor, but once I did, it accentuated my vision appropriately. Corellia Squad, this is Major Mallory, our commanding officer bellowed. Respond. I think they're dead, sir, one of the soldiers in my squad spoke up. He was fairly new, but not as new as me. Why else wouldn't they respond? Don't be ridiculous, Corporal, Mallory snapped. They can't be dead. Reagan and his boys are on a search and rescue mission, for force's sake. Pure reconnaissance. There's no danger. To be fair, sir, I said, speaking up. This city has hundreds of Sith. I would hesitate to call it safe. Don't be stupid, rookie, the major replied. If they were dead, I'd have heard about it from command, not you. What if command's been cut off? The Sith could be blocking communications, sir, another member of the company said in the distance. No, Mallory replied in a fiercer tone. But since you all seem so vocal about expressing your opinions, I think you all re-forgetting your real mission. To kill Sith. So get out there, find Corellia Squad, and kill Sith. Shall I lead them, sir? Sergeant Horan asked, handing him a datapad detailing the status of our entire company, holed up on the different levels of the tower. Of course, Mallory replied. Coruscant Squad, suit up. 3, 4, 5, 9, and 10, you're with Horan. 7, 8, and the rest of Matella's squad, sit tight. A chorus of shouts, confirmatory grunts, and the occasional nod broke out in reply. I was Coruscant 10, so I was with Staff Sergeant Horan on this mission. We all broke off and went to set up. Coruscant 3 and 4 were tough guys, muscleheads with no sense of humor. Coruscant 5 was a Mon Calamari, one of those fishy people from Dak, and he was a chatterbox. Together, the three of them could criticize you, lambaste you, and pretend to compliment you all at once. The Major was just doing his best to keep the chatterboxes away from his post. 9 was, well, he was pretty quiet. Big guy, but quiet. He joined the squad a little before I did, and I didn't know him too well. He didn't make himself known, so it was harder to get to know him, unlike everyone else in our company. There had been a Coruscant 11 and 12 transfers from Ossican Squad, but they didn't last very long. Both of them had died prior to my incident with the minefield. My rookie status deemed indefinite, at least while I was with Coruscant Squad. I went to search for my gear, which must have been moved prior to the aerial bombardment. The rest of my squad was prepared as ever, and they followed Sergeant Horan down the stairs and out of the room. Worried that they would leave me behind, I panicked. Running over to one of the soldiers standing idly by, I asked him if I could borrow a weapon before our commanding officer noticed. But he was attentive as always, so he noticed me too quickly. His first few words were unintelligible. They sounded quite profane, but the rest of his comments were clear as day. Damn hell, rookie. What are you doing here? Didn't I send you with Horan? I tried to reason with him. Yes, sir. But you see, Are you talking back? Rookie. Are you giving me lip? I've just about had enough with your smart mouthed back talk. Now you get your sorry ass in line or, so help me, you'll be court-martialed and stationed on the worst penal colony world the Republic can find. Sir, sorry sir was the only thing I could say. No sly retort, no indignant response, and no justification whatsoever. I don't care what anyone else says about military training, it's effective. Of course I was scared to death of Major Mallory. He was well built, even without armor, and he had enough muscle to rip me in half, and so I left. I left without any weapons or my gear. It was probably the stupidest thing I have ever done. Scrambling down the metal stairwell that had once served as the emergency exit route for this corporation's offices, I chided myself silently. No doubt some idiot from Metella Squad had taken my blaster and gear as their own, not even caring what I would do without them. It was probably a prank. Beating myself up for my carelessness and their idiocy, I didn't even realize I had reached the lobby, where the other members of Sergeant Horan's team were waiting for me. None of them looked happy to see me, and a few muttered something about the slow new guy. "Took you long enough, rookie. Put your helmet on backward," Horan asked, his voice choppy and monotonous. Again, I think he was joking with me, but it was impossible to discern just how serious he was. "No," I muttered back, a tad embarrassed that everyone was staring at me. I just couldn't find a weapon. "What?" The sergeant stopped dead in his tracks. "You don't have a weapon?" "Damn rookie," Coruscant 3 muttered. "He's lose his limbs if they weren't screwed on," Coruscant 4 noted. "You can't just go charging into battle without a weapon. At least say something before we dive into the fray. What would we do if we were down a member in our first engagement?" Horn drawled. I did say you were about to." "Someone throw the kid a weapon," Dorito said. "I've got him, Sergeant," Coruscant 5 replied. He pulled his blaster pistol and extended it to me. "Try not to lose this one," he added. "Now that we've ensured the rookie is armed, can we leave?" Horan asked. Shouts of approvals and a few jeers rang out in the lobby. We were a rowdy bunch. Ignoring some of their harsher critique, I joined the 5 of them as they left the lobby of the office building and headed into the Sith-infested streets around us. The streets were wide, much wider than streets I've seen in the core worlds. They were practically large enough for us to roll tanks through or land transports on. I felt naked, in a sense. In this place, we could be beleaguered by sniper fire, struck by aerial bombardment, and surrounded in an ambush without protection. I missed the building as soon as we left it. At least we were safe there. Sort of. While the roads spanned meters across for the sake of mechanized travel during peacetime, the buildings running parallel to them were the exact opposite. There was almost no space between buildings, leaving just enough room for a few waste compactors lined up side by side. The few alleyways there were happened to be blockaded by durasteel gates, limiting any method of escaping into one during a firefight. If we were assailed by a large group, there would be nowhere to escape. Granted, there were overturned hover cars, damaged street signs, broken remains of buildings, and the like, but those things would be poor cover from a Sith tank. Our footfalls were the only thing that could be heard in this empty city, but the distant cries of Sith bombers were barely audible, destroying some far-off place. Horan led the charge, skittering from various debris on his way through the district streets. 3 and I were next, followed by 4 and 9, and 5 brought up the rear, as the sniper. Turning back around, I could hardly see the Mapram Corporation building over a few other reasonably sized towers. 3 was whispering something to 4, but the Togorian was ignoring him for the time being. "Sith troopers, 8 o'clock. Coruscant 9 shouted in his comlink for the rest of us to hear. Like machines, we all turned around at once and saw 2 squads, about 32 soldiers, heading toward our location. They had not seen us yet, but if they kept moving on their patrol, they would eventually catch up with us. Instead of waiting for them, we decided to take the initiative. Rushing them with swords while outnumbered was foolhardy, and we could no longer afford assistance from the rest of our allies back at base. So we decided to keep it simple. Blasting his way out of trouble was practically the credo of the Republic Army anyway. My squad mates all activated their energy shields. Mine had been stolen, so I had no such defense, and opened fire at the Sith soldiers while running towards some overturned vehicles for cover. The enemy had not seen us, and my companion's shots and Jacques' sniper fire took out 4 of their allies before they noticed. It took less than a second for them to realize what was going on, good soldiers as they were, activating their own personal energy shields so the battle could begin. Their red blaster fire overwhelmed the air above me, keeping me from peering out from over the rubble I was hiding behind. I scampered between cover as quickly as I could, silently praying that I would not be hit. If I was, I could see myself in a military casket. Despite our lack of genuine cover, though, I was having surprisingly good luck avoiding their fire. Every so often, I tried to get a shot in, but I couldn't hit any of them. There were so many, and they were cluttered so close, but I just couldn't find my mark. Grumbling, I tried harder and focused more, but to no avail. I blamed the Republic and its shoddy training methods. Still do. Coruscant IV shields were the first to fall. I watched in quiet horror as he struggled to reload his rifle's power pack and his shielding unit at the same time. Heavy weapon specialist, indeed? His efforts weren't enough, and 3 Sith blaster shots shattered his red and yellow breastplate, one after another, until they had punctured the suit entirely and tore through his ribcage. A bit of blood was visible from underneath the armor, but the intense heat of the shots had cauterized the wound and prevented him from becoming a gory mess. The giant feline let out a soft growl before collapsing to the ground, no doubt in his final moments. There was nothing we could do against the 20 or so enemy troopers remaining. Most of my allies' rifles were already losing power, and we did not have ammunition to spare. No matter how many blaster shots we traded, there was always more coming toward us, and just as many soldiers still standing. Horn tossed a few fragmentation grenades into their midst, but they could only aid us so much. After 3 had died, in an eerily similar manner to 4, Horn ordered a retreat. He couldn't contact Mallory, and he was unwilling to die before we completed our objective. As we scurried away from the fight, the Sith troopers pursued us tenaciously. Torito and Jacques occasionally stopped to fire a few shots back at them, but their attacks were an effective deterrence. After a few minutes of running through the city, avoiding other Sith patrols and battlements, Horn led us into a vacated alleyway. Taking a few sharp turns and throwing ourselves over some metal fences, we eventually lost our Sith pursuers and ended up back in the main streets about 2 kilometers from our base. "Damn hell, rookie," Horn yelled. I was still catching my breath, and before I could respond, he had grasped the collar underneath my armored breastplate and shoved me into the nearest wall. "What's your problem?" he continued, drawing blaster fire toward my soldiers like that. "I have no idea what you're talking about," I snapped back, a bit dazed. My adrenaline was still rushing from our firefight, so I tried to push him away from me. It didn't work. He jabbed me in the stomach. "You'll address me as Sergeant, Boss, His Damn Majesty, or you don't address me at all." "Got it." 5 walked up to him and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Listen, Sergeant, I don't think the kid meant any harm. I mean, I don't think he was using our allies as distractions on purpose." "Not now, Jock," Horn hissed. "If this rookie doesn't learn now, he'll never learn. He can't expose others to enemy fire just to save his own hide." I don't know what you're talking about," I growled as fiercely as I could. I was just ducking and dodging around behind my soldiers' backs, so you could draw the Sith shots toward them instead of you. Horn shot back. "No," I screamed. I tried to pry his hands off my collar again. I was just trying to stay alive. "Knack," and Jock muttered to the sergeant, even though I could hear it. "Listen, it was just an accident. Just file a report after the battle and get the kid disciplined. No need to make a big deal. Why, I remember a time when I just lost 2 good men, Jacques." Horn yelled back. 2 men who've been serving under me for far longer than him. He's trash. I can't believe he's even here right now. Should have died in the minefield. I couldn't take it. Staring at his face, his dark eyes glaring at mine, I had to do something. I felt my eyes tearing up. Trying to gather all of my rage into a single vindictive front, I spat at him. Probably not the best choice, in retrospect. The spit flew by his face and, even though it missed, he was furious. A quick punch to the chest sent me sprawling over. As I writhed about on the ground, he let out a heavy sigh and his anger subsided. I was surprised at how fast he composed himself. Without so much as a grunt, he picked up his blaster rifle and headed north, forcing 5 and 9 to follow him. Gasping for air and trying to regain my strength, I followed their dreary procession as soon as I was able. I wiped some beads of sweat and a few tears away from my eyes. I'd be damned if they thought I was crying, or some such nonsense. I was exhausted, physically and emotionally, and my commanding officer's reproach did me no good. My body seemed to react instinctively to the pain my body was going through, and I felt like I just wanted to keel over and die. Eyes downcast, I followed the trio of soldiers in front of me like a beaten child. I'm a coward. No point in denying it. I'm no good at anything but gathering goods and packing boxes. As soon as I am able, I'll head back home. I should have died instead of those soldiers. They were true servants of the Republic. Dignitaries worth more than I in the grand scheme of things. I'm just so damn selfish. They died because I don't have the strength in me to fight by myself. The streets were as grim and silent as we were. Our journey was slow, but we had lost all sense of professionalism and military rigor that we had before. It was almost as though we were on holiday, a dreary holiday, at best. If we were attacked, we would have died for sure. There was no cover at all in this section of the city. The streets had been cleared so that tanks could tread on through. We didn't even have enough stamina to maintain a marching pace. Besides, our energy cells and power packs were running low or missing altogether, leaving us in a precarious situation. We had been walking for so long I was almost relieved when we made contact with other soldiers. Jacques spotted them first, always the ready sniper, dropping on one knee and pointing his rifle toward a distant alleyway. Torito raised his blaster rifle instinctively while Sergeant Horn powered up his shields, leaving me clueless. However, Jacques signaled for us to stand down. Despite the rust, sweat, dirt, and other deplorable things that caked their armor, it turned out that his targets were Republic soldiers. Sergeant Horn led the procession into the alleyway Jacques identified, our weapons at the ready just in case. There were 2 soldiers in the alley. Luckily for us, their red and yellow armor was unmistakable. The elder of the 2, a Twi'lek, was far older than any of us except maybe Jacques. He had auburn skin, vaguely resembling the color of his now faded combat armor. His leku, peculiar head tails that dangled from the back of his head, were positioned behind his helmet, where 2 customized slits were created for them to fit through. The soldier accompanying him was a female human, probably also a Nankam. She wore a full-face helmet, and I could not discern her appearance from where I was standing. I did not recognize them, but Sergeant Horn stepped out from behind the wall and waved at them. "Soldier, what's your name?" Horn called to the Twi'lek in his usual monotonous tone. "Vaughn," the Twi'lek answered, not the least bit surprised by our sudden appearance. "Master Sergeant Fala Vaughn, Creche Company. I'm the head of Corellia Squad. This is Corporal Marina, my third." Marina acknowledged us with a slight nod of her head. Torito, ever the somber one, was no nonsense. "Why didn't you respond when Major Mallory tried contacting you?" Vaughn crossed his arms and frowned. "Sith pinned down our unit and are blocking communications in and out of the city. We have reason to suspect they're monitoring our channels. Too risky." "Is Major Reagan still alive?" Horn asked. "He's up at the compound with a few others," Marina spoke up. Vaughn pointed eastward, directing our eyes toward a small building about 400 meters away. "Our forces have been hit hard. Major Reagan's been trying to coordinate the attacks but had no luck. As far as I know, we're the last of his unit. Until we met up with the Major, we were sent to track down Sluis leadership in the city. The Major took command of the operation personally once our company fell apart." "How many of you left?" I asked. "Less than a dozen," Marina replied plainly. That wasn't good. Mallory and Reagan were the leading officers in this abandoned hellhole Kaya city, and they had entered with 2 full companies of Republic soldiers. Together with their survivors, our unit numbered at about 30 soldiers. If I was one of the big shits leading this operation, I would have called the situation untenable and gotten out a long time ago. Why were we still here? "So where are the Sluis leaders?" Horn asked. "Also at the compound," Vaughn continued. "We tracked them down and learned they were being imprisoned there. Major Reagan is trying to figure out how to get by the Sith patrols guarding the building. He sent us to search for Besh Company to provide support." "How bitterly ironic. We were searching for you to relieve our situation," Jacques chimed in. "Sounds like a plan," Horn said. We'll join up with you, and you'll come back to our base once we rescue those Sluis. And so we did. I objected to the idea that the sparse remains of Reagan's outfit would be any help at all, but my comments were dutifully ignored. After we introduced ourselves to our newest set of allies, Sergeant Vaughn led the way toward their commanding officer. Torito and Horn followed him closely, while Marina, Jock, and I brought up the rear. Marina had acquired a blaster rifle from Horn, and I was the only soldier in the group with just a blaster pistol. The two soldiers of Corellia's squad were better outfitted than I, and they were just a reconnaissance squad. I am not cut out for this. After taking a roundabout path to avoid a few Sith troopers in the main street, we arrived at an armored building that resembled one of the many Boxish outposts constructed by the Republic during the Mandalorian War. If we hadn't built it, we might as well have. Sith patrols were circling the street around the building, forcing us to creep through several side streets to reach an alley where several Republic soldiers and a few Sluis guerrillas were waiting for us. Welcome back, Corellians, the only Aqualish said. He spoke in Huttese, but he was using an audio translator. Who are they? We're a segment of Major Mallory's forces, Horn spoke up. We're here to aid you in your efforts. Indeed, Vaughn pointed toward each of us in turn, introducing us in Huttese. Staff Sergeant Horn is in charge of the forces. The other three are Warrant Officer Jacques, Corporal Torito, and Ann. He didn't even remember my name. What a surprise. Private First Class Joshua Waris. Best company, sir. I saluted. Or you can just call me Rookie? Everyone else does. Don't be ridiculous, Reagan replied. What sort of nickname is Rookie? Your name is Private Waris, and that is what you shall be called. Sir, I said approvingly. He nodded and turned away. Major, are the Sluis still inside? Horn asked. They are. They're locked up in a room adjacent to the lounge, some sort of archaic safe. I suspect the Sith are planning to export them as slaves. We cannot let that happen. I have a plan, but it will take all our skill and manpower to pull it off. Do you think we have enough men? His sergeant asked. No, Reagan muttered. He removed the translator from his helmet, so he could speak privately. We'll use Mallory's forces as a distraction. Once they punch through the first line of troops, we'll rush the remaining Sith soldiers and rescue the prisoners. That way, we reduce our casualties and get the credit for the operation. He must not have realized I was fluent in Huttese. That sounds risky, Vaughn replied. There aren't enough of them. Do you really think it will work? Bolster their force with a few of ours. That way, they won't be suspicious. Understood. Sergeant Vaughn turned toward us and smiled. In basic, he explained, the compound has two entrances. They don't have threatening exterior defenses. Once the patrols are dealt with, it's easy to get inside. Most of our force will have to attack the main entrance. We'll help in any way we can, Horn said. The Twi'lek nodded, pleased at his response. The interior, on the other hand, is well defended. It will be difficult to get us all inside at once. Therefore, Major Reagan and I propose that a few soldiers try and sneak around the back, kill the soldiers guarding the rear entrance, and flank our enemies during the attack. Sounds easy, Jock noted. Too easy. We're not all going to get out of this one alive, Vaughn admitted. I knew he was referring to us, but what else could I do? They wouldn't believe me. The guards outnumber us 3-1, and they can call for reinforcements when necessary. Sergeant Horn glanced over us, eyeing each of his soldiers before responding. I'll nominate Rookie and Torito for the main attack. Vaughn glanced at the major, who muttered something in Huttese. What is it? Jock asked, growing suspicious with all their whispering. Major Reagan thinks it would be better if Joshua went with Marina and Jacques round back, Sergeant, Vaughn said at last. Horn assented, electing Jacques to lead our flanking team. Assembling the few survivors of his company, Reagan gave them and their Sluis allies a few inspired words, and then allowed them a moment to themselves. While they prepared their weapons and shields, Jacques led Marina and I across the street toward the building directly neighboring the bunker. We made our way along the right side of the taller building and silently progressed until we reached the back alley. It was cramped, forcing us to walk single file, but at least there were no Sith troopers. You and Marina will be the flanking unit, K-Rookie, Jacques informed me. I'll be waiting on that roof, watching for Sith reinforcements. You a sniper, Jacques? Marina asked, somewhat jokingly. I didn't know your kind's eyes were good for that kind of thing. The Mon Calamari smiled, ignoring the veiled insult. It's more of a hobby, really. Why, I could tell you about my first rifle, all the way back on Adamastor. Shooting giant ropens right out of the water. Those were the days. Why, even after that, during the Mandalorian War, I might want to head on up, I interrupted him. We'll be attacking any minute now. Jacques sighed. He seemed crestfallen and actually wanted to finish his story. Nevertheless, he climbed up a nearby ladder to a rooftop on the building adjacent to the one we were attacking. Meanwhile, Marina had prepared her weapon, the blaster rifle, and activated her shield's energy unit. Her movements were fluid, noiseless, and reserved. Just watching her made me worried. I had less confidence, less skill than a woman. Marina, I said, you ready? You're asking me? Hotshot. She asked. Have you even activated your shields? Where's your rifle? I frowned. I don't have either, but. Let's go, Marina said, flipping off her comlink. They're starting. She led the way forward, walking several meters further into the alley until we had found our way to the back of the large complex. Sidling on the right side of the metal door that served as a, strangely unguarded, back entrance, she signaled for me to join her. Once I was there, blaster in hand, she held up 3 fingers and started counting down. Wait, I whispered hoarsely. Are we going on 0 or 1? I assumed 0, but apparently I was wrong. Spinning around on one foot, she elbowed the door's control panel, causing the rusted door to slide open with a painful whine. Squeezing her blaster rifle's trigger, Marina released a steady stream of green fire that caught several Sith troopers inside unaware. Once she charged inside, I peered in after her. No sense waiting. With a deep breath, I crouched as low as I could and followed her inside. The bunker's interior was boring and wholly forgettable. The walls, ceiling, and floor were covered in shining durasteel, which would have looked impressive if blaster residue and splotches of blood had not stained the halls. As I pursued Marina through the halls, she managed to fire at any wandering Sith soldiers we encountered before they threatened us. Before I knew it, we had reached what must have been the lounge. Surrounded on all sides by doors that led to different sections of the bunker, it was essentially a central hub for the Sith troopers stationed within. There were several couches, some other miscellaneous sofas, and more than a dozen chairs scattered about, entirely ruined during the firefight. Bookshelves and game tables had been broken or tipped over, transparent steel was everywhere, and bodies were already strewn across the carpeting by the time we arrived. Sith troopers were trading fire with our Republic and Sluisi allies, sending green and red blaster fire around the room in confusion. Only 2 or 3 Sith troopers noticed our entrance, and they fired at Marina. My companion's shield protected her from the bulk of the blaster fire while she dashed from one end of the room to the other toward cover. I, on the other hand, ducked behind a nearby overturned table to avoid getting killed. Incoming shots ricocheted off the metal table, sending bursts of red energy in random directions. My allies were too distracted by the other soldiers to help me, but I could tell that the Sith firing at me were getting more and more precise. I wanted to fight back, but my body refused to move from behind the table. After all, I had no shielding and was armed with a measly pistol. Marina slid behind a couch near my position. "Rookie," she shouted. "The Sluisi are behind that door. The rest of our soldiers are pinned down, so we have to free them." I glanced at the door she pointed at. It was a thick metal door across the room that seemed to guard some sort of vault. About 5 meters from where I was, there was no way I could reach it without assistance. Sith soldiers were everywhere, spread out across the room, and without a shield I was as sure as dead. No way. I'm staying here. Her cover fell apart in a single blaster shot, forcing her to put distance between herself and me. "Don't be a coward. I'll cover for you." I was dubious of her ability to protect me. She was a woman, after all. I don't trust you. Blatant and rude, but true. You what? She shouted back angrily. Rookie, you free those captives, or by the Force, I will shoot you right out of cover until you do. I begrudgingly accepted my fate at that point. Rolling from the cover of the table, I avoided the incoming streams of red blaster fire and sprinted headlong for the vault. All the while, Sith troopers around me were peppering me with blaster fire, missing me by slimmer and slimmer attempts each time. Luckily, Marina kept her promise and leapt out from behind cover to draw their attention from me. With my allies around the room engaging their own selection of Sith soldiers, I was not harassed any further. I reached the door to the vault in less than a minute. The door was only accessible by keycard. I smiled when I saw the keycard had been left in the slot. Pushing it inside, I heard a soft click. The door slid open, revealing a hulking Tlandor waiting inside. The quadrape stood in front of all the Sluis with the holdout blaster in his small arms. I think I screamed when he pulled the trigger and hit me at nearly point-blank range. Pain. Darkness. I don't want a posthumous medal. My eyes fluttered open, and I gasped when I saw nearly a dozen Sluis surrounding me. Everything was quiet now that the fighting had ceased. The serpentine beings were muttering to themselves in their native tongue, and all their eyes were focused directly on me. It was peculiar and a bit uncomfortable, to be honest. Suddenly, one of the elder Sluis with red-hued skin approached me, pushing his way through the crowd, and glanced at me with his single good eye. He is alive. The Sluis shouted in Basic. The Sork demons lives. The Sluis cheered and repeated the phrase in their native tongue. I don't think I've ever been so confused. During their bizarre chanting, Horan, Reagan, and Marina shoved their way through the crowd of natives. The look on their faces was one that surpassed shock. It was as though someone had been cut in half and returned to life before their eyes. Rookie, you're alive? Sergeant Horan asked. Even his normal monotone voice betrayed terror. Yeah, I muttered. I was still a bit weak, and I couldn't stand. What happened? The Avatros survived his trial of courage and fire. He has been reborn as the great spirit of our ancestors, Sork demons. The elder Sluis shouted. The other natives cheered again. Quiet, Major Reagan growled in Huttese. Private. What happened? I don't know, I admitted. I saw one of those huge Tlandor, and he shot me. I thought I died. His armor's punctured, but the mesh underlay absorbed about 96% of the force. His chest's been bruised, burned a bit too, so it'll sting for weeks, but he should be fine, Marina announced, kneeling over my collapsed body. He's lucky to be alive. How is that possible? Horan spoke up. In close quarters like that, I should be dead. The Sork demons cannot die, the aged Sluis interrupted. He can only be reborn, reincarnated in times of dire need. Would you shut that insane fool up? Major Reagan asked one of our Sluis aides. Where we come from, you do not interrupt important conversations. Sergeant Horan, Major Reagan, Jock's voice chimed in. Even though he was talking in our leader's comlinks, I could hear him clearly from where I was. You'd best finish up in there. There's a Sith patrol headed our way. They don't look happy. How many soldiers? Horan asked. 24, give or take. Should I engage? Negative, Reagan replied. Get behind the building, where Private Waris and Corporal Marina entered. We'll meet you there. Can you stand, Rookie? The sergeant asked. I nodded, even though I was not sure. I didn't want to be any more trouble than I already was. Then let's go, Reagan said, cutting the comlink. Marina, get the other Corellians and round up the Sluis. Sergeant Horan, take your squad outside and link up with Jacques. Torito helped me to my feet while Marina and the Major tried to convince the surviving Sluis leaders to follow us. I was grateful for the help, but incredibly embarrassed. This entire escapade had to stay off my records, except for the part where I got shot. I could get a medal for that, and maybe free liquor. Once I was sure I could stand, I grabbed my blaster off the ground and followed Sergeant Horan to the base's rear exit. As planned, Jacques was there waiting for us. After a few moments, The remainder of Major Reagan's unit in the liberated Sluis joined us. Venturing through the alleyways, we stayed as far away as we could from the Sith patrol, but it was difficult to hide nearly 50 sentient beings on short notice. We escaped detection, but just barely. Sergeant Horn was giving orders to Dorito, Jock, and I when Major Reagan interrupted him. With so many new allies in tow, he figured it was a good idea to contact Mallory and determine a place where we could join forces. Traveling all the way back to the Mapron building would be impossible with so many unarmed Sluisi to defend. We needed to meet somewhere closer. Our discussion was cut short when our radios suddenly crackled and returned to life. This is Colonel Ducian Eto, Republic Army, broadcasting on all Republic frequencies. I repeat, this is Colonel Eto. Please respond if you receive this message, so you can receive your new orders. Colonel Eto was the leader of the 39th Battalion here on Sluis Van. He was a real big shot. Survived more than a dozen battles, fought under Revan himself in the Mandalorian War, and ended up remaining with the Republic while most of his allies defected and formed a Sith Empire. We respected him, and for good reason. Someone with the tactical prowess and skill he's got could have joined the scruffy, brown-nosed generals in Republic brass long ago. Instead, he chose to forego promotions and stay a colonel to lead us common soldiers. Or so the story went. The colonel was stationed at Outpost SV-0, one of our remaining holdouts here on Sluis Van. It was well defended and contained all the soldiers and machinery we pulled back from our other bases. There was no way the Sith could launch an attack on it without major casualties. Colonel Eto was safe to give orders from there. But then, it was one of our last bases, so it won't be safe for long. To be honest, I would prefer it if the Sith kicked us right back into the core. I'm no traitor, but it would be a really nice change of space. I'm already tired of the snake people. Either way, the colonel's voice was a nice surprise for our tired spirits. All of us cracked a smile, and we eagerly clicked our comms in response to his message. After being redirected by several communications officers, we were told to stay put until the colonel could speak with us personally. Is this Besh Company? Colonel Etos asked via Sergeant Horn's helmet-mounted comlink. Yes, sir, he replied. By the Force, the colonel muttered. When we lost contact, I thought we'd heard the last of your unit. I thought for sure the Sith had bombed the city. How many of you are left? 3 from Coruscant Squad are with me, plus the remaining 4 members of Reagan's company, sir. We've got some Sluisi with us, as well, Sergeant Horn explained. Besides us, Major Mallory and the rest of Besh Company are stationed in the Mapron Corp building. The comm was silent for a moment. Major Mallory and his men are dead, Sergeant. Confirmed KIA. For now, Major Reagan is in command of the evac operation. I'm sending 2 Nibha-class carriers to pick up the survivors, meet them at the city limits ASAP. Eto out. I bowed my head out of respect for Mallory and the other members of our unit. The Sith must have found them, or they were killed during another bombardment. This was just another case of me surviving when better soldiers died. Unlike me, Sergeant didn't know how to handle the news. Horn's knees buckled. Mumbling to himself, his face blanched, and he started hyperventilating. We were the last members of Besh Company, and Sergeant Horn was our commanding officer. I don't think he's ever been in an absolute leadership position, and he's always had Mallory to help him out. Major Mallory had no children, but Horn was the closest thing he had to a son. I pitied him. He basically lost his father today. Major, Jock said, his voice stilted and a bit confused. How shall we escape the city? The Aqualish Major was quiet for a moment. After talking with 1 or 2 of his surviving soldiers, he glanced at a datapad that contained a map of the city. There is a sewage system that flows from the center of the city into the surrounding countryside. No doubt the evac carriers will be waiting for us. Let's go. No one said anything to Horn. We figured it would be better to give him the silence and time he needed to recover from the alarming news. After some time and several wary searches for Sith patrols, he recovered. Once we were prepared, Major Reagan led the way. Republic soldier and Sluisi marched side by side, making our way from the side streets into the sewers on the eastern edge of the city. The sewage flowed beneath the city through massive interconnecting tubes large enough for a hover speeder to travel through. In retrospect, we should have used these tunnels to travel across the city. Luckily for us, the water was shallow since plumbing had not been used since the city was attacked by the Sith a few weeks ago. Nevertheless, the trip was not exciting. Dreary stone lined the walls, and fetid water lingered at our ankles, reeking of excrement and rotting food. A few of us, including me, gagged at the violently bad smells, but the rest of the soldiers and the Sluis endured the torment without a word. Once our procession of soldiers and natives made it through the sewers, Major Revan led us into the vast countryside beyond the city limits. In times of peace, they would have looked stunning. Now, scarred by deep gashes where bombs had been dropped and littered with torn-up earth left behind by tank treads, the region was almost forgettable. The city was burning behind us, its larger towers collapsing at long last from repeated artillery fire or aerial bombardment. It belonged to the Sith now. Just as the last of our soldiers had emerged from the underground tunnels, two Nighthawk-class low-altitude carriers descended upon us. Gunship-sized vessels meant for transport and support roles, these vessels had been in service for at least 10 years. Their most prominent and useful feature was their enlarged and elongated aft, a stark contrast to its sleek and conical forward section. "We're dividing our forces," Major Revan announced, "just in case we're shot down on our way to base. A dozen Sluis will be placed in each ship, and they'll each have a squad to escort them. Coruscant, you're with Nighthawk Alefdorn." Sergeant Horan mumbled in acknowledgement, even though he was not actually speaking to anyone but himself. I was worried for him, despite our previous encounters. He needed to talk to someone, but I didn't know what to say. Without a word, he motioned for Torito, Jacques, and I to join him on the first Nighthawk. We were lucky to have a 4-man squad after this mission. Granted, we lost Major Mallory and the remainder of our allies, but at least we could say we survived. The Corellians had lost Sergeant Vaughn in the attack on the bunker, along with several of their Sluis scouts. I knew we weren't supposed to dwell on the deaths of our comrades, but I couldn't help it. Something was bothering me. I couldn't pin down what it was. Before I knew it, the Nighthawks were nearly 9 kilometers in the air, leaving behind the city and the dead soldiers to burn under the last wave of Sith bombardment. Colonel Ducian Eto sat in his chair, resting his arms on his desk. He twitched ever so slightly every few seconds, but for the most part, he was lost in thought. Sweat dripped from the back of his neck and ended up running down his red and yellow officer's uniform. Tight-fitting and altogether uncomfortable, the uniform caused the humidity of Sluis Van to be near unbearable. The sweat traced the combat scars and weathered rugged lines in the colonel's face, causing Eto to run his gloved hand through his cropped black hair to keep the sweat from his eyes. It didn't work as well as he hoped, causing him to sigh. The colonel skimmed the flimsy at his desk. There was no good news to be found. According to the reports, the Sith were beating back the Republic army on every front. Several cities had fallen to the Sith during the past few hours, including ones Eto had ordered destroyed. His soldiers' efforts had failed before the Sith could seize their resources. There was practically nothing left of Besh or Kresh Company after a haphazardly prepared strike against a Sith-controlled city, but his other 2 companies were faring a bit better. Since arriving on Sluis Van some 3 weeks ago, Colonel Eto had pleaded with the Republic Senate for reinforcements. At first, he received no response. Lately, he had been sternly rebuked for requesting more soldiers to secure an apparently unimportant Outer Rim world that was not a member of the Republic. That left his single battalion, the remains of a battered reserve fleet, and local Sluis natives the only thing standing between the Sith Empire and this world's valuable shipbuilding resources. Colonel Eto hated guerrilla warfare, but he hated drawn-out sieges even more. If he had any more troops on reserve, he would have used them to secure outpost SV-1 while the fleet distracted Sith leadership in orbit. With the Sith generals distracted, Eto would send the bulk of his forces to capture the primary Sith base on the western continent. From there, he could use the resources seized to bolster his own efforts. Unfortunately, he had no other soldiers. All of his men were stationed in SV-0 or SV-1, the last Republic outpost. A knock on the colonel's door forced him to return to reality. "Come in," the weary officer said. Lieutenant Rogers Thonel walked in at his behest. Although he wore the same officer's uniform as Eto, he was in every way his opposite. The colonel had attained prominent muscles and equally grievous scarring as a result of countless hours of training and in combat. Thonel, at least 15 years his junior, was androgynous, bright-eyed, and frail. Eto had read his file. He had never seen a day of combat in his life. He was an officer who had received his rank based on his family's status, not skill or dedication. The lieutenant saluted his senior officer as he walked in. In his other hand, he was balancing a large stack of data pads and flimsy. Although he had no field experience to speak of, Colonel Eto could think of no better assistant and advisor than Rogers Thonel. He was worried that promotions would have sent him into the field, thus he delayed sending such recommendations as much as possible. "You have news for me, Lieutenant?" Eto asked curtly. "The remnants of Besh and Kresh Company have returned." "No good, sir. There are only about a dozen of them." Eto scowled. "I was afraid of that. Also, Ruan and Duro squads have been sent east, per your orders, to scout out the Iridorian presence there." "Is that all?" "I'm afraid not, sir." "You're afraid not," the colonel repeated with a groan. "I was afraid of that. What is it, Thonel?" The leader of the Sith forces wants to speak with you." "On a private channel, sir?" Eto's face betrayed no emotion, but he was surprised. The Sith rarely held audiences with their opponents, Republic or otherwise. In fact, it was quite unlike the Sith to accept anything but death from their foes. If one of the Sith generals actually wanted to speak with a Republic commanding officer, their situation might actually have been worse than the Republic's. "I'll take it from the comment here, then. Thank you, Lieutenant." "Of course, sir." Thonel saluted. Before he left the room, he added, "And the rest of Besh and Kresh Company, sir. Merge them with Altesius's unit." "As you wish." Once Thonel had stepped out, Eto was left to his own thoughts again. Not wanting to leave the Sith waiting, the colonel warily activated the communication panel near his desk. After obtaining the necessary frequencies from his comm officers, Eto returned to his seat as the image of a meter-tall, hologram blue figure formed before his eyes. Within seconds, the vague and distorted shape had taken a humanoid appearance, and Eto could barely make out the individual's clothing and physique. The speaker wore an imposing black mask, apparently of Mandalorian design, that was speckled with rust and worn from numerous battles. A hood covered the holographic figure's head, eventually drooping near the shoulders and joining a thick black cloak that was draped over the Sith's ornamental combat robes. Colonel Ducian Eto. The figure's voice was calm and cordial, if a bit distorted behind the mask. The colonel was surprised. His appearance suggested a sinister tone. He was far more worried, though, because he thought he recognized that voice. "You have me at a disadvantage," the colonel replied. "I'm disappointed, Ducian. After serving me so well at Vana and Makem Te, you seem to have forgotten me so quickly." "Revan," Eto shot back. "Darth Revan," he retorted in kind. Eto shuddered in his seat. Darth Revan, Dark Jedi and traitor of the Republic, was speaking with him for the first time in nearly 5 years. After the Battle of Malachor V, the colonel had hoped to never hear from Revan again. It was bad enough that just talking with his old general brought back secrets and regrets from the Mandalorian War. He had left Revan's fold because of the brutal tactics that the colonel could no longer agree with, but he tried to hide his disgust as best as he could for now. "What is it you want, Revan?" "I just want to talk, Ducian." The Sith paced from one side of the hologram to the other. "Like we did before the war." "That you started," Eto snapped. "I don't believe you just want to talk. Remember Ord Cestus? I think you were saying something about returning to your family." Revan continued his former thought. "My sister," Eto replied fiercely. "Since the war ended, she's the only one left. The Mandalorians killed everyone else." "I know, and I'm sorry," Revan said. Extending his hand, he reached out as though Eto could grab it. "No, you're not. If you were sorry, you'd turn yourself into me, right now." and we would have peace again. This time it was Revan who shuddered, more so to mock Eto than out of fear. That cannot happen, Ducian. Your skills as a leader are invaluable. Did you think we could have won Azure without you? Don't be coy with me, Revan. Did you know I had to personally take command of this battle? Revan continued, ignoring the colonel for the time being. The former leader was unable to properly fight your ruthless offensives. If you were still fighting for me, you'd be leading soldiers as a general by now. I'm not in this for promotions, Revan. I'm in this to stop the fighting and bring you back to your order. You are a traitor to them and to the Republic you swore to serve. Is that what you tell yourself so you can sleep? Is that what you tell your soldiers? Or even your sister? Revan asked, cackling with delight. Poor, naive Ducian. The Republic leadership has abandoned you. They do not respect your skills or your dedication. You are just a pawn to them. A poor cat hound that they regard only because he knows how to bark and fetch. Your words don't work. I won't join you, Eto replied. You and I are nothing alike. Revan raised his hands innocently. I never suggested such things. However, I have taken notice of your soldiers' faltering morale. Their cowardice is prevalent, and even my neophyte force sensitives can sense their fear. I am not merciless, Ducian, and you know this. Tell that to the Mandalorians who died at Malak. The colonel's eyes blazed with anger, and he added in a hushed voice, tell that to the Republic soldiers you left around Malak. If you and your soldiers retreat in 3 days' time, I will allow your ships to leave the system unmolested, provided they do not attack my vessels. The colonel glared at the lifeless mask before him. He couldn't even remember the man's actual visage. It had been so long since he had seen the fallen Jedi's true face. You would never let us do that. I would. You have my word. You're Sith. You've become treachery incarnate. As a friend, for your actions during the Mandalorian War, there is but one small thing you must do for me in return. Eto shook his head. He knew there was a catch. I will not swear allegiance to you, Revan. The Dark Lord sighed. No, Ducian. I already said I have no desire to forcibly enlist your services. However, there is a Jedi Knight in your service who has piqued my interest. Eto nodded slowly, bidding him to continue. The young Jedi holds a key in her hand that no one else has. You have no idea what she can accomplish. Without her, the entirety of the Galactic Republic and my own empire could be endangered. How do you know this? I have foreseen it. I don't want that to happen, but I sure don't trust you. You don't have to, Revan stated simply. Simply surrender the young Jedi, Verita Latala, to me. If you do, then all your men will escape the planet. Thus swears Revan, Lord of the Sith and Emperor of Korriban. Consider the position you are in, the lives of all your soldiers, and the life of your sister before responding to my offer. Eto allowed Revan's body to dissipate, fading into an intangible blur. The colonel remained in his seat, meditating on Revan's words. Despite his best efforts, the words of the Dark Lord gnawed at his mind. There was no way he could deny that Revan's offer was the most satisfying option he had. He would risk the lives of men needlessly if he tried to attack the Sith elsewhere, and there were very few tactical locations his forces could defend. But what did Revan want with Verita, and why would he let the entirety of the Republic go because of her? It made no sense. It had to be a trap. The colonel placed his right hand above his brow and rested his arms on his desk. Regardless of the means, Eto would ensure that his soldiers escaped Sluis Van. Revan could not prevent that, and the colonel would see to that personally. Sorry, Verita. No messages, as far as I could tell. Should I inquire further? No, that's quite all right, Gale. I have to get going anyway. I need to get back to my patients. Very well. May the Force be with you. Stay safe. You too, Gale. Verita Latala sighed as she watched the holographic representation of Gale Remus fade from view. The Nautolan Jedi was still stationed on Dantooine, so he had offered to keep an eye on any incoming transmissions or messages for her. He had not inquired why she was so eager to keep an eye on these messages, nor had he complained when Verita moved further and further from the core and contact became more difficult. She appreciated his efforts to keep her up to date, and she could not ask for a better friend than him. As a Jedi Knight, Verita Latala was well known for her healing abilities. The Jedi High Council had lauded her as a prodigy, and to foster her gifts they sent her across the galaxy in search of more knowledge and great healers she could learn from. One of her earliest trips had been to the peaceful world of Alderaan, where she had stayed in the royal court for nearly 3 years. It was there that she had fallen in love with the Prince of Alderaan. The Jedi as a whole frowned upon romantic love and attachment especially, but she had disregarded their warnings. There was nothing she could have wanted more than to be with him. If that meant abandoning the Jedi Order, then she would have done so in an instant. Since she had left Alderaan, he had promised to message her on a regular basis. Verita obsessed over her long-range comlink and the Dantooine Jedi Enclave's communication center, waiting for messages for him. After they had departed, he had been fairly consistent in his scheduling of these messages, but about 4 months ago he stopped entirely. The last she had heard of him, he had gone on a diplomatic mission into what had once been Mandalorian space. Verita refused to believe that he had forgotten about her. It was impossible. However, there was no way for her to check her messages now, so Gale stepped in to help her. For now, though, she had her own duties. As a Jedi Knight of the Republic, she was responsible for healing those who were wounded in the fight against their fallen brethren, the warriors who now served Darth Revan and Darth Malak. She was the finest healer in the Jedi Order, and she was determined to use her skills for the good of the Galactic Republic and its soldiers. Reaching the medical wards, she received status updates on several critically injured patients she had treated during her last visit. According to the room's terminal and doctors, they were all in the process of recovery. Verita smiled. She had been worried about 1 or 2 of them, but to hear that they were all doing well took a great weight off of her. Taking a datapad from the lead doctor, Asambra Escalon, Verita got to work without a second thought. The wounded in war were always the most painful to treat, but Verita didn't dare complain. Making her way between cots, she picked one to heal before moving on. Pulling back her cloak sleeves and folding her tawny robes, she revealed the glowing power of the Force that was evident in her fingertips and forearms. Using the Force to ease their pain, clot bleeding, and repair damaged flesh, Verita did her best to ease their suffering. Traveling between victims, she ruled over the power she had been given. Healing others was no doubt one of the highest callings of those that served the light, but at the same time, there was very little she could do in the most hopeless situations. The Force was a powerful ally indeed, so powerful that she could hypothetically resuscitate those who were near death, yet it depended so much on her own power. As she traveled between cots of soldiers, she had to be careful not to exhaust herself trying to push her own limits, or else she would become fatigued before she reached all of the patients. While she was healing some burns on a soldier's leg, a nurse approached her from the other side of the room. "Master Jedi." "Yes," Verita asked, brushing locks of blood-red hair away from her face. "Colonel Eto wants you to track down someone for him." Verita did her best to not look shocked. As the only Jedi stationed in the main Republic base, she was mostly in charge of tending to the wounded. Every so often, though, Colonel Eto felt inclined to let her run errands. Although the Jedi were technically inducted into the Republic military hierarchy as lieutenant colonels and their equivalents, this was hardly ever noted, and most officers simply respected the Jedi's autonomy. But Colonel Ducian Eto did things his own way. To the colonel, the Jedi were just another group of soldiers. Powerful, no doubt, and beyond comprehension to those who did not use the Force, but soldiers nonetheless. As such, he sent the Jedi under his command to lead units, fetch supplies, and work military shifts. The fact that he refused to go through the Jedi High Council for approval earned him the ire of several Jedi under his command. Verita had no such qualms, but she knew her powers were best used here. To help the weak, she did not understand why Eto was calling her off. Who is he looking for? He needs a private named Joshua Warris. He should be down in the southern barracks. The colonel hasn't had time to track him down, the nurse explained. He can't just send some soldier to do it, Verita asked, a bit irked. Well, he summoned most of his units to a meeting, leaving very few remaining soldiers on patrol. Private Waris hasn't shown up, and he wants to meet with you. He figured you could fetch the private on your way to meet with him. Very well. I'll go grab him. Joshua Waris? Correct. Yes, Master Jedi. Here's his information. Verida skimmed the information briefly. Once she was confident she knew how Joshua looked, she bid farewell to the nurses and doctors working in the medical wards and headed for the barracks. The base was empty. As the nurse had explained, most of the soldiers were meeting with Colonel Eto. During her trek, she realized that she had been in such a hurry to leave she had forgotten her lightsaber in the hospital. Cursing her forgetfulness, Verida fought the urge to turn around and continued south, working her way to the barracks Joshua Waris supposedly resided in. Following the instructions on her datapad, Verida made her way to the third set of infantry quarters in the southernmost barracks. Rapping on what she hoped was his door, Verida was unsurprised when she received no response. Trying again, she used the automated door alarm as well, which was usually used for waking unenthusiastic recruits. Again, there was no response. Verida was unsure whether there was anyone inside at all, so she extended her perception in the Force to see beyond the door. To her surprise, there was someone inside, and he appeared to be dressing himself. Verida pulled her perception back into her own surroundings before she caught a glimpse of anything she had no desire to see. Who is it? A young man's voice spoke from the door's comm unit. Verida, she replied. Who? I'm a Jedi Knight, she explained. Eto sent me. There was a brief silence before the door slid open. Verida saw a man about her age waiting for her on the other side, his face agitated and groggy. He was lanky, almost uncharacteristically so for a young soldier, and he tried to hide his light build under the military jacket he wore over his thin white shirt. Wearing mismatched trousers and boots, Verida suspected she had awakened him. This was Joshua Waris. He didn't look like a soldier, and he hardly carried himself like one. He was not respectable like the colonel, and he was not dashing and handsome like the prince was, but there was something about him that caught her attention. Whether it was his stance, his demeanor, or something in his dark brown eyes, she hadn't a clue. Such thoughts were beyond her anyway, and she was not here to analyze him. What do you want? He asked, his voice ragged and cold. Verida crossed her arms. She didn't want to appear agitated, but she had never been addressed like that before. No need to get rude, Joshua. Eto sent me because he's in a meeting with a large group of soldiers, your comrades included, but you didn't show up. He wanted to be sure you were still coming. Of course. Let me grab my things. No time, no need, Verida replied. Eto will take you as you are. As far as I know, it's just a pre-battle planning session. Joshua nodded. At her urging, the two of them left Joshua's room and headed for the meeting place. The Jedi Knight made haste from the barracks to the meeting place, while Joshua was content with meandering behind her. She waved him on every few seconds. After a bit of verbal encouragement, he did his best to keep up, but he was forced to jog after her. Her brisk pace seemed to be too fast for him. In spite of the complaints that Joshua grumbled, she did not think she was being unreasonable. Leading him through the snaking halls in the practically empty base, Verida brought Joshua to the courtyard where Eto was meeting with a very large contingent of soldiers. The courtyard was littered with bushes and flowering plants, with a rustic set of pathways and a few scenic waterways. It was in the center of the roads, in a clearing between some trees, that Colonel Eto met with his soldiers. The remainder of the battalion he led, along with his surviving commanding officers, were scattered around the pedestal the colonel was standing on. Lieutenant Thonel stood off on one side, taking notes. Joshua settled into the crowd with natural ease, drifting away from Verida without noticing. The Jedi Knight intended to stay for the meeting's entirety, but there were no other Jedi around, and she would not be involved in the planning. Realizing the meeting would go on for some time, Verida left the courtyard to fetch her lightsaber. To my dismay, Eto was nearly done with his speech when I arrived. Not that I was eager to listen to the whole thing, but being dragged from my room by a rabid Jedi Knight was not my idea of a fun time anyway. While the Sluisi engaged the Iridorian reinforcements near the entrance to the forest, 14 teams of Republic soldiers will attack their outpost from its flanks. Once the Eridorian forces are engaged, the remainder of our soldiers will venture further into the forest and destroy the anti-air batteries positioned near Defender. Once their batteries are destroyed, our ships can land safely and pick us up from there. Any questions? Are you saying we won't be conquering Sluis, Van, Colonel? A soldier asked. That is correct, Sergeant Major, the colonel replied, hesitantly. Our objective has shifted. Escaping the world with as many lives as possible is our utmost priority at this time. Sir, another soldier spoke up, will we be receiving armored support? The area around the landing zone is too forested to use our tanks effectively. Swoops are a possibility, but we don't have enough, Eto explained. Eto continued taking questions about the upcoming operation. From what I could tell, the Sith had finally played their best cards, Dark Jedi and Eridorian mercenary reinforcements. Without additional forces from the Corps, our mission on Sluis Van was hopeless. Colonel Eto could only improvise and escape as best as he could. Even for someone of his caliber, that could prove difficult. We owned the Defender landing zone for weeks before the Eridorians arrived. As if to demonstrate their brutality, they slaughtered our garrison defending the LZ and captured it for the Sith. Even so, the colonel figured it would be the least defended of the planet's landing zones, all controlled by the Sith. While some of the commanding officers questioned Eto's plan thoroughly, my eyes drifted through the crowd. Searching for a familiar face, I was concerned because I couldn't see anyone I knew. I should have seen Jacques or Marina in the crowd somewhere. Even Horan or Reagan would have been welcome. Venturing further into the crowd, I continued scanning the faces around me. During my scan of the area, I saw someone rapidly approaching our position from the eastern side of the base. Horan. The figure appeared to be Sergeant Horan, but he did not appear like himself. His eyes, sullen as they were, seemed tainted and bloodshot now. Ghastly and pale, it was as though he had traveled to the grave with Major Mallory and come back to meet us. To my surprise, he withdrew a shotgun from the holster across his back and fired at a random individual in the crowd. The boom of the shotgun and the cry of the female soldier he had hit echoed in the crowd. In the distance, I could see his target fall to the grass below while blood splattered across her back. In response, the two non-commissioned officers stationed on guard duty fired at him. Their blaster weapons proved ineffectual against his personal shields, and he shot them both down as well. The entire crowd dispersed into a tumult. Even Colonel Eto, normally composed and stolid, seemed startled as he was escorted away by a number of officers. Most soldiers ran for cover or left the area entirely, not entirely sure what was going on and suspecting Sergeant Horan to be the vanguard of some greater attack. Others tried to pin him down, to no avail. He fired round after round of slugs into his assailants, leaving their corpses strewn around him in the grass. Soldiers were not allowed to have weapons on hand while in the base, leaving everyone who was not Horan at a distinct disadvantage. I had no idea what was happening. What was this madness? Sergeant Horan had given up on aim and skill as he fired at random, allowing his shotgun fire to spread out around him in every direction. His shields were durable, so even soldiers who broke the rules and found blaster rifles were helpless against him. Why was Sergeant Horan attacking his own allies? What happened to him? Drawing on all the strength I could, I was determined to stop him. It was a ridiculous idea. Everyone who had tried to stop him was already dead. I didn't care. I knew him, and that alone gave me the justification I needed to stop him. Managing my way through the chaos, and over the bodies that were spilling blood into the ground, I found myself less than 3 meters from Horan. He and I were separated only by a rather large bush, and his back was turned toward me. There was no way I could restrain him. I knew he was stronger than me. Without a weapon and lacking shields, I could not hope to defeat him in combat. Nevertheless, this insanity was too much to endure. Without a second thought, I sprung out from behind my cover and struck at him. The sergeant must have seen me in his peripheral vision. He sidestepped my attack, causing me to fly helplessly through the air. With a heavy-handed swing, Sergeant Horan smashed the back of my head with the butt of his shotgun. I was on the ground in an instant. I could taste the dirt on my lips, and there were warm rivulets of blood flowing from the back of my head. Struggling to get up, I heard Horn reload his weapon behind me. Pressing his boot against my back, he stomped down until I was face first in the grass again. It was over. My consciousness was fading in and out, but I knew that his gun would sound. I winced and prepared for my inglorious end, but no one pulled the trigger. Sergeant Horn's attack did not come. The distinct buzz of a lightsaber activating sounded just above my head, and I heard Horn scream several times. There was the shattering of metal, and then I felt another body land on mine before I blacked out entirely. Colonel Eto had summoned Verita after the chaos had died down. He had informed her that she was to lead a squad of Sluis insurgents against one of the anti-air guns at the Iridorian base. This was no trouble for her, and she agreed. Before she left, though, Colonel Eto also confessed to her that Darth Revan was looking to capture her. She had no idea why, but Colonel Eto was not taking any chances. She would be escorting a large group, and several Republic officers would be nearby at all times, just in case. Without another word, she had excused herself from his office. It had been nearly 3 hours since the commotion at Colonel Eto's meeting. Verita Latala was as busy as ever, healing older patients as well as the influx from the event. Sergeant Horn's rampage had not actually killed as many soldiers as initially suspected. Most of the soldiers involved had been wounded, although some had received severe injuries. Among the few dead soldiers was Corporal Marina, a soldier who had served alongside Horn during his recent mission. Colonel Eto's forces were falling apart on themselves, and the time for their attack was nearing. Desperate to get as many soldiers as he could, Eto had called the other Jedi in from the field to aid Verita in her efforts. Now, she and the other Jedi were hard at work ensuring everyone in the medical wards now would either be able to fight tomorrow or were strong enough to be evacuated. Although she was scrambling about in her efforts to heal as many as she could, she had noticed that Jocelyn Warris had been confined on her side of the medical center. Checking his vital signs and injury report during some spare moments, she noticed that he had some minor to moderate bruises, a few cuts, and a light head injury. His wounds were nothing compared to some other soldiers around him, but he was not quite in fighting shape either. Healing him while he was unconscious, Verita ensured that his wounds were healed during her trips around the room. Even so, he appeared dazed and not quite recovered, so she went out of her way to visit him during one of his bouts of consciousness. "Hello again? Jacques?" "Yes," she teased. Joshua struggled into an upright position and shook his head. "Joshua, Jacques is the Mon Calamari." "Ah, that's right. My apologies, Joshua," Verita said with a smile. "Colonel Eto has me checking up on patients here. He wants to make sure that as many injured soldiers as possible are able to fight in tomorrow's offensive." "I'm going to be fighting," Joshua grimaced. "Of course," the Jedi explained. "You were to be led by Sergeant Horn, but his condition will force Eto to reassign you. I suspect you will be placed in Major Altesius's unit." "Are you going to be aiding us?" "Yeah. You and your allies will be on the front lines. I will be helping the Sluisi. They're resilient, but they'll need some help against the Iridorians." "You're a warrior, then?" Verita winked. "Not really. I'm more of a healer. Ask any of my old friends, Gale, Nazar, Marcellin, and they'll fill you in." Joshua shifted uneasily in his bed. Something she had said must have bothered him. "Were you the one who saved me from Sergeant Horn?" I heard a lightsaber before I passed out. I think it broke his gun. Was that you?" "Oh, yes, that was me." "I suppose I should thank you," Joshua replied, not at all sincere. "You sound bitter," Verita noted. "Figured that out, did you?" "No need to be rude," says the Jedi. Verita frowned. Did Joshua have a problem with her? No, it was not with her. The Jedi as a whole seemed to be the object of his disdain. But why? Determined to find out, Verita took a seat at the end of Joshua's cot. His body tensed again, as though he was worried about her presence, and she was certain that there was something amiss. "Do you hate the Jedi?" "I don't blame you if you do," she said. We're not holding ourselves together very well. And I don't hate the Jedi, Joshua admitted, but Verita could sense his deceit. Are you sure? My brother, Joshua blurted out. My brother was a Jedi before the Mandalorian War. I braze. Maybe you've heard of him. I haven't, actually. What happened? He was trained on Coruscant, but he tried to keep in touch with my family. My father wouldn't have it. He was disowned. The old man thought he was a failure because he refused to take over the business. Your father didn't like the Jedi, then. What do you think? Joshua snapped. Ibraze was grieved by my father's reaction, and he followed Revan off to war to prove himself. The rest isn't important. You can tell me, Verita assured him. Joshua shook his head. I don't hate the Jedi. That's all you need to know. Very well, Verita replied slowly. She very much wanted to talk about Joshua's family, but she realized that it was not her place to pry into his past. She knew that he was hiding something, because she knew that he actually resented the Jedi. He just refused to admit it. With a bit of a sigh, she rose from his cot and headed back to the other patients. The next morning, I left the infirmary to prepare myself for battle. I had reacquired my combat suit, the damage to it had been repaired, and received some new equipment for myself. Once I accounted for all of my accoutrements, I headed into the hangar. The remnants of Colonel Eto's battalion were packed into the rust-colored hangars like red and yellow livestock. I had never seen so many soldiers before. There were so many faces. I was certain that I saw soldiers who I had served with under Major Mallory. But, of course, that was impossible. There were only 8 Neebhawks available to us. Their maximum capacity was about 30. Squeezing every last man they could into the few aerial units we had left, the officers gave us a few encouraging words before sending us on our way. As the sun rose over the hills at 0500 hours, the Neebhawk's engines roared, sending us to execute Colonel Eto's ultimate plan. We were thrown into the forest around our target nearly an hour later. Our going was quiet at first, but it was not long before laser fire erupted in the distance. Our artillery was probably raining emerald fire down upon the Iridorian soldiers within the heart of the forest. For now, we were told to advance. Underneath a canopy of tree branches and a multitude of leaves, the sun barely shone into this forsaken forest. Without the light, it was impossible to see more than 6 meters ahead. 20 or so Republic soldiers, my new comrades in arms, had intermingled in the logs and thick brush around me, carefully navigating through the darkened woods. The laser fire stopped at sporadic intervals, leaving the soft crunching of leaves and the thumping of our hearts as the only sounds we could hear. I had crawled through the underbrush for several minutes before finding cover behind the gnarled trunk of a dying tree. 2 other soldiers raced beside me, taking cover behind an overturned log directly ahead of me. As far as I knew, there were no enemies this far from the landing zone, but it paid to be cautious. Better to sneak around than stride through the forest and end up dead. Major Altesius, my new commanding officer, had opted to venture out onto the field with us. He reminded me of a wild man from the stories of my youth. Orange-brown hair circled his face in great swatches of hair on his head and a thick beard, leaving a bit of room for his beady little black eyes. He had giant's hands, holding a rocket launcher as though it were a toy, and had a thick, almost unintelligible accent. He was eccentric at best, but I did not question his bravery. I had seen very few officers, outside of emergencies, join their men on the field. Suddenly, soldiers around me opened fire at some unseen foes in the distance. I followed suit, popping out from behind the tree and releasing a steady stream of green fire. I couldn't see my enemy, but their shimmering red return fire was obvious enough. Major Altesius bellowed at us, probably to keep firing, but I couldn't hear him because the damn laser fire had started again. The forest was disorienting, and it was impossible to see anything, but I did my best. Other soldiers had just as much luck as I did, firing at random and hoping to hit. The major launched a few rockets deeper into the forest, shattering trees and sending dry clumps of earth flying through the air. My blaster rifle overheated, and I ducked behind cover just in time to avoid a few stray blaster shots. In my peripheral vision, I saw squads of Republic soldiers and Sluis warriors racing forward, ready to circle around and strike at our enemy's flanks. While my blaster cooled down, two other members of my squad, Torito and a green-skinned Twi'lek I didn't know, remained close by and kept firing. Once my weapon was back at full power, I traded positions with Torito, letting his weapon restore. Hold position. Here come the Eridorians, my comlink crackled with Major Altesius's voice. If you get a chance, push forward. Sadomasochists and animals, that's all they were. Armed head to toe in heavy armor, the Eridorians made a fearsome sight to us and our comparatively light-armored selves. They carried short wall blades and carbines, along with a few additional weapons in case of close-quarters combat. No one wanted to fight them, their bloodlust was legendary. Nevertheless, we held our ground. Just as the last few shots were fired from Sith troopers in the distance, orange energy from Eridorian carbines soared over my head. The first one charged through the brush and tackled one of our leading riflemen. He was quick. We didn't even realize what was happening before he was upon us. The poor soldier he had pinned beneath him was subjected to his knucklers, jagged and coated in a vicious concoction of biological agents. Several swift punches and cries for mercy later, and our squad had taken his first casualty. The remains were gruesome. The soldier's bloody remains were splattered about the forest floor where he had died, and his Eridorian killer had torn out his eviscerated entrails as if to dine on them. The sight was too much. Some soldiers fled in spite of the Major's orders. While we fired all we could at the enemy, two of our squadmates nearby tried to stop the Eridorian warriors' advance with their swords, but his knucklers were quicker. Two swift cuts severed their torsos from the rest of their bodies. Their gory remains splattered all around him. The amount of blood on his armor, the trees, and the grass was nauseating. I shot at the Eridorian in a frenzy, hoping that it would not pick me as his next victim. One of our allies leapt down from the tree he had climbed and cut through the Eridorian's armor with his viper blade. The alien's dark blood splattered everywhere, but our squad fired on him until we were sure that the beast could move no more. Of course, that was not the end. 12 more Eridorian warriors emerged from the forest, charging headlong into our ranks. Orange carbine fire raced through the air from behind them, finding their mark on two of my allies. Altesius was really shouting now. The Eridorians threw grenades into our midst, forcing us to scatter. My Twi'lek ally had not been fast enough, and his body was torn apart by the explosion. The blood-curdling screams of the Eridorians were amplified by their helmets' receptors, weakening our resolve even further. From the corner of my eye, I saw dozens of Republic soldiers fleeing the battlefield, running toward the edge of the forest to escape the Eridorian attack. We were at a disadvantage. Our blasters could not breach the enemy's shields fast enough, and we were sure to lose in close-range combat. Even so, Major Altesius refused to order a retreat. I was firing at random now, hoping that the torrent of blaster fire coming from my weapon would slow down the advancing horde. Torito had pulled back a bit, realizing his blaster fire had minimal effect. I didn't move. I could not move. Ambush. Left flank. Left flank. One of our soldiers had tried to warn us, but we were too late. Another swarm of Eridorian warriors sprinted forth from the left, attacking a few unprepared Republic soldiers with their heavy axes and serrated knives. Realizing our situation, Major Altesius ordered an immediate retreat. Most of us accepted his orders gladly. The Eridorians pursued us for about 2 minutes before losing interest. Instead, they turned to butchering the corpses of our dead allies and wallowing in their blood. Disgusting creatures. During the ensuing panic and unorganized retreat, I was separated from my squad. Artillery fire pounded the forest, shattering trees and tearing holes into the ground all around me. Vertigo overwhelmed me as the twisted undergrowth and low-lying trees began to blend into a maze of green. My ears rang violently as the artillery fire got closer and closer, and I struggled as much as I could to get away from it. Stumbling about on my own, I found myself entirely lost. I could see battles in the distance, but I did not dare approach them. I saw Eridorians satiating their bloodlust in clearings, but I could not fight them. I wanted to find the edge of the forest so I could escape and maybe regroup, but I didn't know how. I was lost and terrified, and the laser fire was getting closer. Running across the corpses of Republic soldiers, Sluis, and Iridorians, I had no idea where I was going. As I continued through the forest, I saw a squad of Republic soldiers pinned down near a crashed Neebhawk. There were many dead, but they were using the last of their resources to hold back an Iridorian force. If I could link up with them, I would be safe for the time being. Scrambling through the brush, I was close enough to hear their shouts and see their turrets clearly. Then, without warning, an artillery shot hit the Neebhawk like a bullseye. The shot had been perfect. Every Republic soldier and Iridorian warrior died as the downed craft exploded. I had been close enough that I flew through the air, violently landing on my side while the charred remains of bodies and burning metal pieces fell around me. That was our artillery fire. Why did it hit our ship? Our gunners did not make such careless mistakes. Every single one of the soldiers dead. They never had a warning. As I lay there, blaster fire flying over my head, I was sure I was going to die. My legs were shaking and my side had gone numb. I could hardly even hear anything. "This is Lieutenant Colonel Foe." My helmet's comlink crackled to life. The voice was faint, as though I was hearing someone shout from a distance, but I could hear it. "My group has destroyed the third A gun. We need infantry support to engage the Iridorians and destroy those last guns. I repeat, we need infantry support, over." Once I could stand, I started running. I didn't know where to go, but I was certainly not going to approach the Iridorian stronghold. The battle in the forest had become splintered and personal. Most of the combat took place in small duels or exchanges of blaster fire between 2 or 3 squads. I could see these fights in the distance, barely making out the distressed shapes of my allies and the vicious forms of the Iridorians. I couldn't help them. I couldn't, even if I wanted to. Moving on, I left them all to their fates. As I ran, I saw a lone Iridorian using his carbine and combat knife to fight a group of Sluis warriors. Those serpents were cut down almost effortlessly, and even the last of them, carrying a Republic-issue shotgun, was taken down before he could kill the Iridorian. Normally, I would have kept running and not paid this slaughter any mind. But as luck would have it, the Iridorian noticed me, and so I was pursued. The Iridorian was clearly faster and stronger than me. He had just killed about 6 Sluis by himself. I could not simply escape him either. I was too tired and he would run me down. With no other option, I turned to face him and stood my ground. Taking my last fragmentation grenades, I threw them toward the incoming warrior, but I missed both times. Backed into a tree, I realized that he was less than 4 meters away now. With a feral howl, he sprinted even faster to close the distance. I would have to face him in close quarters. Discarding my blaster rifle, I drew my vibroblade. Once he was within range, I thrust my weapon forward, trying to stab at his heart. I missed. He blocked my strike with his heavy knife, and then he shot me at point-blank range with his carbine. The blasts were absorbed by my shields, but the force was enough to knock me into the trunk behind me. I would not survive that again. I gave him a kick to the knee, and the Iridorian crumpled over. I tried to stab him with my knife again, but he grabbed the vibrating blade with both hands, despite the fact it was tearing into the flesh of his palm, and ripped it from my hand with brute force. While he recovered his footing, I ran around him and approached the group of dying and dead Sluis. I was reaching for the shotgun to finish him off when I felt something cold plunge into my back. Gasping, the pain from the attack knocked me over. Half conscious, I turned and looked at the Iridorian. He was standing now, but he was still back at the tree. He must have thrown his knife and struck me in the back. What a lucky shot. Blood was pouring out of the wound, but it had missed my spine. My heart was racing, and my face turned cold. I was going to vomit. The Iridorian licked away the blood from his hand and fired a few carbine shots at me. My shields gave way as my body did, causing me to hit the ground with a heavy groan. I couldn't die here. The Iridorian marched forward, hovering over me like death itself. Adrenaline and rage conquered the fear that had mastered my body, giving me the bit of strength I needed to fight. Before he plunged my own viper blade into my back, I spun around and fired the shotgun I had procured at my enemy. The resulting blast shattered his breastplate, spraying his blood into my face and sending green bits of metal to my feet. The Eridorian collapsed at my side, gurgling as his lungs filled with blood. He shouted Reynos or something to that effect, coughing blood on the inside of his visor. As I lay motionless on the ground, just as close to death as he was, the old red Sluis crawled toward me. His left arm had been torn apart by the Eridorian's blade, but he still had the strength to reach out to me with his other arm. The eye patch that had covered his bed was now gone, revealing some sort of ghastly, tumorous growth where his eye should have been. "The Sork Daemons lives," he said, panting. I shuddered. He was still babbling about that prophecy. "I'm not a spirit, and I'm certainly not your savior. You have passed your trials of courage and fire," the Sluis continued. "What are you talking about?" I fumed. "I'm about to die, you're about to die. We're all going to die. I couldn't even save Mallory Horn Marina, they're all." "The Sork Daemons cannot die," the Sluis muttered. He gasped for a few seconds more, and then he died. I stared at his motionless form for a few minutes, utterly speechless. Blaster fire was still flying over my head, and I could hardly focus with all the sweat in my eyes and blood in my mouth. What was I supposed to do? Spirits, Eridorian monsters, and Sith. Why did I sign up for the military? That poor old fool was adamant to the end, but his shotgun had saved my life. I tried to reach out to the red Sluis to close his single good eye in reverence, but I was too weak to even do that. I screamed. I cursed my own cowardice, incompetence, and weakness. Then I started sobbing. The tears rolled down my cheeks and under my helmet until it mingled with the sweat and dirt around my neck. I didn't even know why I was crying. Maybe I was crying for the old Sluis and his failed prophecies. Maybe I was crying for the inevitable collapse of the Republic. Maybe I was scared of dying here. I'm pathetic. Several Republic soldiers found me sometime later, motionless on the ground. Examining the area, they were certain I was dead. However, my moans and sobs betrayed the fact I was alive, and they carried me away from that graveyard of Sluis. As they dragged me through the forest, burned and decimated by bombardment, by my arms, my helmet fell off. Free from the murky visor, I saw everything around me with terrifying clarity. I didn't want to see any more. My legs were carried over bloody Eridorian corpses, the severed limbs of Sluis warriors, and broken bits of metal and cloth from Republic armor. Fire engulfed trees and grass, flesh and stones. The muddy residue on the ground was unnatural, a mix of blood, oil, and grime from soldiers and machines. My sweat-drenched hair eventually covered my eyes, providing me with the relief I craved. I couldn't even close my eyes in fear of crying again. I was brought to one of the bulbous Dieth-class transports that had been responsible for carrying us to the larger Foray-class blockade runner waiting in orbit. It had been docked just meters away from what had once been the entrance of the forest. The ventral section of the craft had been left open, and I was carried up on an automated stretcher. Colonel Eto was stationed in this transport, and he gave me an encouraging smile and a tap on the shoulder as I was carried into the hangar which had been cleared to fit all the evacuated soldiers. Eventually, my stretcher was placed alongside several other wounded soldiers, and I was told to remain still until we were in orbit. Eto was walking by my position, talking with his lieutenant. "How many troops are still groundside, Lieutenant?" the colonel asked. "Less than 80, he replied. "The majority of the Sluis who have survived have been recovered." "And our Jedi?" "We lost 6 of our 10, Lieutenant Thano said gravely. "We rescued 3 survivors. Verida is still groundside assisting the Sluis. Shall we wait for her?" Eto paused for a moment, stopping in front of my stretcher. He seemed troubled, but said nothing at first. He began, "We'll leave Verida. Our transports need to link up with our fighters now. The Sith don't realize that we're leaving so soon, thanks to our distraction at the LZ, but we cannot waste any more time. Get us into space, Lieutenant." I will give the orders, sir. So here I am, in a bar at fair. I've hardly recovered from that battle. There happens to be a section of the fair graveyards dedicated to those who died at Sluis, so I stopped by their graves today. Major Mallory, Corporal Marina Horan, Verita, I left each of them some flowers and scribbled a little note for each of them. I know they can't read it, but it's the thought that counts, right? I cried a bit while I was down there. Some kids were there with their mother while I was leaving my gifts, and they started crying too. Their dad died in that battle. I can't believe it. I was bawling like some kid. I should have died back then. I don't know how the hell I'm alive, and they're not. Colonel Eto resigned from his position shortly after the battle ended, and he received several honors for his prominent service. I haven't heard from him since Donald, his lieutenant, took up some of his duties. Horan killed himself while being sent to the Corps for psychological treatment, and I heard he took a few others with him. He was officially listed as killed in action for the sake of his family and his career, but most of us know the truth. Major Reagan lost his leg during the final battle against the Iridorians, and he was honorably discharged before moving back to Ondo. He won't be fighting anymore, I'm sure. I haven't heard anything from the Jedi Order, and I don't intend to, but I suppose they did something nice for Verita. I hope they did. She deserves as much. I run my finger across the rim of my empty glass. The bawdy music of the bar is hardly enjoyable, but at least it's nothing sappy. I would start crying for sure. I reach for the brandy, but Torito beats me to it. Pouring himself the last of its contents, he dons a victorious smile as he drinks the last of it. Jacques laughs, apparently at my startled expression. Distracted, rookie. You almost never miss the bottle, he says. Yeah. What were you thinking about? Jacques asks. Sluis Van, I reply. Heh. I still remember it like it was yesterday, Jacques quips. He places his glass on the windowsill of our practically empty table. It feels like yesterday for me, Jacques. Doesn't it? You should really consider joining the Republic Navy. No blood, no Iridorians, and you receive excellent pay. Starfighters aren't too hard to pilot either, or so I hear. I shake my head. Sorry, Jacques. I got to keep my feet on the ground. Someday, maybe, I'll take you up on your offer. Jacques shrugs. Fine. Just a thought. I know Torito is too afraid of heights to join me. Torito scoffs quietly and takes the empty bottle as he leaves the table, intent on filling it up again. Don't tease him, Jacques, I retort. It's a perfectly sensible fear. Of course, Jacques mutters. Reaching around to the side of the table, Jacques pulls out a large black case. This is for you. I look over it. It isn't too impressive. What is it? My old sniper rifle. Jacques, you don't have to. No, take it. He holds his hands out, preventing me from returning it. I insist. As I pull the rifle case onto my side of the table, Major Altizia stomps over to us. He survived the battle, as I had expected, and Torito and I have been under his command ever since. I stand as quickly as I can, banging my knee on the table, and salute. He waves and beckons me to sit back down. Let's go, boys, the Major says, and no more drinking. We're heading out. Yes, sir, I say. Picking up the sniper rifle case, I throw it under my arm and stand up. Turning to Jacques, I add, well, I'll be seeing you. Don't get your starfighter blown up. Yeah. The Mon Calamari laughs at the thought. Never. Enjoy yourself, Corporal Rookie. Until we meet again, pleasant skies and good hunting. I nod and wave one last time before following the Major outside. Torito trails behind me, carrying a new pitcher of alcohol with his blaster pistol. As we leave the bar, I scarcely hear Jacques begin singing some sad old military tune from our days on Sluis when we were with Mallory. It sounds so atrocious when he sings it, but I suppose it can't be helped. It sounds like a better coping mechanism than crying. Until we meet again, in this life or the next.